It was a weapon of mass destruction, just waiting for a rogue spark to set it off. It was the key that unlocked the doors to countless computer systems and wreaked havoc on a scale never before seen. From crippling hospitals and airports to bringing hundreds of institutions to their knees, this vulnerability became a nightmare come to life. A digital disaster that left a trail of destruction and chaos in its wake. It was known by many names, but none as infamous as the one given to it by its creators. EternalBlue. EternalBlue was created by the National Security Agency as part of the Fuzzbunch Toolkit, which was software the NSA designed to help them infiltrate Windows systems. Fuzzbunch provided the NSA with free, stealthy, and privileged remote access to almost any target Windows machine. It's unknown exactly when EternalBlue was created, but the NSA had it for at least 5 years before it was leaked, and the vulnerability itself existed in every Windows operating system since the 1993 release of Windows NT. If you had a Windows machine that was network enabled before 2017, odds are you were vulnerable. The vulnerability exists because of flaws in Microsoft's implementation of the Server Message Block, or SMB protocol, which is a way that computers can share files, remotely access each other, and use Windows domain services. EternalBlue is, at its core, a buffer overflow attack. This is a buffer. It's a section of a program's memory that's specially reserved to store things, like numbers or text. The program can fill up the buffer with stuff, take stuff out of the buffer, and as long as everything stays within the buffer, everything works fine. The problem is, if you write data past the buffer, it overwrites the program's memory, which is not good, and it usually causes the program to crash. This is how a buffer overflow attack works. It fills up a buffer and then writes specially crafted machine code past the buffer that allows the attacker to gain control of the target machine. The EternalBlue exploit achieves this by abusing how the Windows SMB program handles packets, which are the building blocks that form internet requests. The exploit will first send an initial packet that's filled up with as many zeros as possible in order to fill up the buffer. And then it will send another packet whose job is to point the SMB program to the payload code. The target machine takes both of these packets, and since the SMB program didn't allocate enough memory space for them, the packets will overwrite the program's memory, causing a payload code to be executed and the machine to be compromised. For the NSA, the EternalBlue exploit was a closely guarded secret, until sometime around early 2017, when a group of hackers known as the Shadow Brokers had somehow stolen it. It was around this time in early 2017 that the NSA found out their tools were stolen, and to their credit, they did warn Microsoft about the vulnerabilities, and Microsoft released a patch for the vulnerability on March 14, 2017. Of course, most people just ignored it, as people often do with security patches. But it did end up saving countless systems. The Shadow Brokers first tried to auction off the stolen exploits, but nobody really took them seriously. Probably because they talked like Jar Jar Binks in every blog post and wrote deranged sexual fanfics about democratic political figures. Which, by the way, were also written like Jar Jar Binks. Anyways, the Shadow Brokers just decided to leak the stolen exploits anyway, exactly 1 month after the Microsoft patch on April 14th, 2017. Maybe it's fitting that the folder's decryption password was... Perhaps it was an omen of what was to come. I don't think anyone could have predicted that this leak in particular would uncover the single most devastating exploit in history.
One of the very interesting pieces about this specific dump was when it happened, a lot of security researchers in industry turned around and said, these aren't going to be that interesting. They're all old code exploits and we're not going to see them used. that tune changed pretty quickly.
Malware developers sensed blood in the water and immediately began creating malware, especially crypto miners and ransomware, using the EternalBlue exploit. The first of the EternalBlue exploits to be released was Edelkuz, just a couple of weeks after the leak. Edelkuz was malware that installed a cryptocurrency miner on the target machine. Except with EternalBlue, instead of just infecting one machine, it could now infect entire networks with hundreds of machines at the same time, all automatically within a couple of minutes. Edelkuz soon began infecting hundreds of thousands of computers, and at this point, security researchers were starting to raise the alarm.
Big dog, we got a situation here. I'm going to need some backup.
Then, just as Edelkuz was taking off, on May 12th, 2017, the WannaCry ransomware was unleashed on the world.
The other developing story this morning, the global cyber attack.
Crippling cyber attack has businesses around the world on high alert.
This malicious software has run riot around the world.
Security experts say this is one of the worst and most widespread pieces of malware they've ever seen.
Once it was on your computer, WannaCry would encrypt every single one of your files, making them inaccessible and unrecoverable. The virus would then demand a ransom payment in Bitcoin in exchange for the decryption key. More than 200,000 computers across 150 countries were infected in just the few short hours after WannaCry was released. Funnily enough, systems infected with Edelkuz were unable to be infected by WannaCry, which limited the damage considerably. And on the evening of May 12th, a security researcher named Marcus Hutchins was able to effectively kill WannaCry by registering a domain address that he found in the malware's code. But by that time, the impact of the WannaCry virus had already been felt on a global scale, and there was no cure for computers that had already been infected. In the UK, thousands of computers belonging to the National Health Service were infected with WannaCry, leading to at least 19,000 cancelled surgeries and appointments.
Yeah, I was supposed to have a stent put in over the weekend, but they can't do it now because of all this computer hacking.
Machines belonging to the Interior Ministry of Russia were ransomed and inoperable. Renault, Nissan, and Honda were forced to halt production. FedEx suffered significant losses because their courier systems were inoperable. Thousands of German and Russian railway ticket machines and information screens were suddenly unusable. Hospitals, universities, businesses, and people were hit hard. Once the attack was over, the WannaCry developers got away with $130,000 in ransomed Bitcoin. The economic impact of the attack, however, is estimated to be in the ballpark of $4 billion. After the WannaCry attack, thousands of WannaCry virus clones were developed and deployed, and they also caused a lot of damage. There were a few that stood out amongst the rest, and one that overshadowed even WannaCry as the most destructive virus of all time. The NotPetya malware first appeared on June 27, 2017, in the eve of Ukraine's Constitution Day, a national holiday that celebrates the signing of Ukraine's constitution, an important step in Ukraine's transition to being a democratic state. NotPetya was initially believed to be a clone of Petya, another ransomware that used EternalBlue to spread between systems. However, it soon became apparent that NotPetya was, as the name implies, NotPetya, and it was not designed to be ransomware or extort money. Instead, NotPetya was a completely destructive virus that aimed to cause as much chaos and damage as possible, especially to Ukrainian systems. NotPetya used a second exploit that targeted a vulnerability in a popular Ukrainian accounting software called MEDoc. Purportedly, the MEDoc vulnerability was purposefully introduced into the software just 6 weeks prior. Once NotPetya infected a computer, it would steal Windows domain credentials, encrypt the entire hard drive, and then use the stolen credentials, the EternalBlue exploit, or the MEDoc exploit to gain access to other systems and do the same thing. NotPetya swept through Ukraine like wildfire, disrupting businesses, government agencies, the country's national bank, airports, ministries, metro systems, and the state power company. NotPetya also caused the radiation monitoring system at the Chernobyl nuclear power plant to go offline, which could have been very bad. The most notable victims of NotPetya were the shipping companies Maersk and FedEx, which were forced to shut down many of their systems for weeks. The attack cost Maersk an estimated $300 million in lost revenue, and FedEx lost an estimated $400 million in revenue. Countless other Ukrainian institutions and businesses were hit by NotPetya, and it resulted in an estimated $10 billion worth of total damages. Do you think, when the shadow brokers initially leaked EternalBlue, that they might have speculated it would cause all this? Or even further back, when people at the NSA made the decision to hide EternalBlue from the world for 5 years instead of getting Microsoft to patch it, do you think they could have foreseen the destruction? Upwards of $14 billion in damage, livelihoods destroyed, critical infrastructure disrupted, operations of hospitals, governments, and a nuclear power plant frozen. Of course, hindsight is 20/20, but I think everyone pretty much knew this was a possibility. Which begs the question, is it wise of the NSA and other government and corporate entities to keep these weapons of mass destruction for themselves for use in petty national conflicts? Or should they disclose them to minimize or even completely stop the potential destruction? What do you think? Thanks for watching. If you liked the video and would like to see more like it, consider subscribing. That's all from me. Peace.